Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Pupil Transportation Drop-In being hosted by Ohio School Boards Association. Thank you for joining us today. This is another one in our series of our bi-weekly Wednesday morning sessions where we're bringing to you current events as they're related to the pandemic. We have a big agenda for you today, and we have some guest presenters with us also. So let's go ahead and jump in. Take care of a few of the housekeeping things here. The conference is being recorded, and so this recording, as well as the PowerPoint and other resources, will be available on OSBA's website. We've opened up a new page called Transportation After the Pandemic. And so you get to that by going to the OSBA website. You do need to log in. Under Services, select Transportation Services, and then on the left side of the screen, scroll down to the page that says Transportation After the Pandemic. This is a new web page, so we've moved a lot of our pandemic transportation issues to this site. This page is dedicated just for this. On that site, you will find recordings and the PowerPoints from our previous drop-ins. You will find recommendations from the School Transportation Task Force, which you're also going to hear as part of the presentation today. You'll find guidances and recommendations from other state agencies, including the two just released here in Ohio, ODH's guidance for K-12 education, as well as ODE's Reset and Restart Plan. So all that information is available to you, and today's events will be posted and available, if not this afternoon, most certainly by tomorrow morning. So we are at the upper end of conference attendance for this session. So all of your microphones are turned off, and we are watching the chat field. We will do our best to answer questions in the chat field. However, if we don't get to your question there, we will be posting a question and answer document also on the same website that I referenced before. We do ask that you please enter your complete name in your Zoom window so that we can follow up with you if needed. Unfortunately, because we are at the top end of enrollment, if something happens and you lose your connection, go back in, try to log back in, but if we have crossed that 300 line, you may not be able to get back in. I'm sorry about that. That is the limit of the Zoom license. However, rest assured that this entire presentation is going to be recorded and the PowerPoint available to you. So let's start with some legislative updates. I want to share some information with you. Last week, there was language proposed for consideration in the Senate Education Committee. The essence of that language was that it would limit the number of students that any public school district could assign to public transit as part of their transportation service. So specifically, what the word said was that school districts would be prohibited from providing a voucher, you can think of that as a bus pass, for public transportation to any student enrolled in grades K through 8 that it's otherwise required to transport under current law. So effectively what it means is you could not assign students in grades K through 8 to public transit if your district does that. The language ultimately was not added to a bill in the Senate, but the senators involved have indicated that it might come back up in future discussion about transportation issues. I'm sharing this with you today because you need to be aware of the issue, and if it does come up, we want you to be prepared to defend that current practice of using public transit with the legislature if necessary. I think it's entirely possible that members of the legislature don't know how important all the different transportation resources are. Last year in our total K through 12 enrollment, there were almost 50,000 students that rode public transit buses. Obviously, not all of those are high school. There were some in grades K through 8. In some cases, we have districts using paratransit for special need and individual service, and all that would be impacted by that bill. So we want to keep a close eye on that. Next thing I want to talk about, and a number of questions have come in already in advance, wanting to know, well, what happens if the virus pops up in our community and there's more infection and we need to shut down? Are we allowed to turn off bus service? So here's the issue. Last October, 3327.015 was made effective. And what that says is that no Board of Education of a school district can reduce the transportation it provides to students. It's not required to transport under section 3327.01, but that the district chooses to transport. So what's that mean? If you are busing K through 12, and that's how you start the beginning of the school year, and then you decide to eliminate transportation for your high school students, what that law says is once you've started it, you can't stop. So the three associations that represent schools, OSBA, OASBO, and BASA, did ask the legislature to consider waiving that for the upcoming year, given the pandemic issues, and they declined to take action on it. The House is in recess until November, but the Senate still has one session scheduled each month through November. And I share that with you because we may need them to take action to set that bill aside if problems come up. And I will point out that Superintendent of Public Instruction Paulo Di Maria is authorized under House Bill 197 to set aside this provision, but as of yet has not done so. So here's the bottom line. Without a waiver from this law, there's no mechanism in place for a district to legally reduce transportation after the start of the school year, even for an increase in COVID-19 risk. So obviously, last year we stopped service, in fact, we stopped school, and that was done by the governor's order. Without another order from the governor, we got a problem. You know, if your community needs to close down because you have a viral increase in your community, there's a problem. And so we need to be aware of that. Update on BMV and CDL issues. CDL applicants can make appointments at testing centers to take written tests and purchase temporary packets. However, BMV testing sites are not yet open for driving tests. So they won't allow you to make an appointment to take a CDL test at one of the state's BMV sites. However, here in Ohio, we have third-party testing sites that are open for testing appointments. You do need to call in advance. If you go to the website that I referenced earlier, there's a list of these sites available as well as their phone numbers, and give them a call. And so you can go ahead and set up appointments for drivers to do testing through those private sites. Last week, 2 new guidances were issued here in Ohio, and just a couple of high points. I do encourage you to look at these. They are both available on our Transportation After the Pandemic page. I want to just hit the high points of both of them. In the Ohio Department of Health guidance for K through 12 education, what they did is they provide a framework for districts and school leaders to reopen school buildings while also helping reduce the risk of exposure and the spread of COVID-19. Their guidance includes best practices for assessing symptoms, increasing sanitation, social distancing, face coverings, and risk assessment and mitigation. I think it's important to note here that when you read their guidance, you need to read the entire guidance. Try not to read just one paragraph and take it out of context. And it's important that we keep this whole thing together, and it makes more sense that way. Here are the specific guidances that I pulled out of their document that pertain to transportation. First off is we have to clean surfaces frequently, paying close attention to high-touch areas. Secondly, we want to avoid airborne droplet spread. Everything we're seeing now from the medical experts tells us that that's the primary way that COVID-19 is shared, and it's spread through airborne droplets. And that's why we've had all the conversations and the mandates about masks. What ODH says is where social distancing is difficult, face coverings are essential. And I want you to remember that point because that will come up as we start talking about how do we manage transportation and the capacity of a school bus. Here's an important point, and this finally in print in the ODH guidance. School staff, just like businesses, are required to wear masks or face shields. So yes, that does include your bus drivers. You're going to see some slides in a couple of moments where we recommend it. Those slides were actually written before this guidance came out. Know that ODH is now saying school staff are required to wear masks or face shields. And then in a transportation consideration, what ODH says is they strongly recommend that school districts require students to wear masks while being transported. And we'll talk about more of that when we get into the task force recommendations. ODE also issued their guidance, which they've entitled Reset and Restart. And in the intro to that, they state that their goal is to help schools understand guidelines and considerations for reopening schools. They want to spur local discussion and decision making, and that continues to permeate throughout their document. What they're looking for is they're issuing guidance, and they want every district to make its own decisions. ODE's reset and restart considerations are not mandatory, and they do make a couple of assumptions. One, conditions can change rapidly. We're seeing that throughout the country right now. Second, schools will need to operate in various modes at different times. This goes back to the comment about what happens if the virus is spiking in your community. Can you turn off some bus service? Well, we may need to. And then third, guidelines from ODH and local health departments may change, leading to course corrections during the year. When they talk about transportation in their guidance, there's not a whole lot of content in there. What ODE says is in transportation, we need to maintain transportation that's safe for both students and employees. Transportation will require careful planning, and they encourage district opening plans to address school bus logistical issues. This is exactly what we've been saying in our last 3 to 4 drop-in sessions, is that transportation folks need to be at the table with district administration. You can't roll out a school opening plan for your buildings without including transportation. If the two are not at the table at the same time, folks, your plans will fail. And then in Appendix B of ODE's guidance, they've identified critical questions that must be answered. So this is where we were 4 to 5 weeks ago. There were lots of questions, and it's been interesting. We've had transportation supervisors contacting us, asking questions. We've had superintendents contacting us, asking questions. And out of that was born what we are calling the School Transportation Task Force. So here's the issue. There are countless questions as to what's practical and what's pragmatic and what can we actually do to help us move forward. Some of the questions we have to find the answers to. We can't continue to plan for a new school year of transportation when all we have are questions. So out of that overabundance of questions, we had a number of transportation directors that sent notes to us, and ultimately we have a collection of 29 school professionals. These are transportation directors from across the state of Ohio working together as a transportation task force. The members of that task force are studying routing, staff training, bus stop procedures, cleaning and sanitizing issues, exposure management, how to keep running the transportation office, and bus equipment. The mission of that task force is to research, review, collaborate, and use their experience to develop sound guidance for school transporters. The goal is to draft and maintain a guidance document comprised of best practices and considerations that will help Ohio school districts. And again, coming back to the strength of Ohio's transportation directors, what we were really looking for is some practical and pragmatic action plans so that we can move forward and figure out how to get the buses rolling. This task force has been working hard for the last 4 weeks. And just like task forces across the country, reports are starting to come out. We now have the first round of reports from each of our groups. They're posted on the OSBA website that's entitled Transportation After the Pandemic. We've already rolled out 2 of those sub-reports in our drop-in sessions. Today, what we're going to do is jump into all the reports, and I've got members of the task force that are joining with us today, and they're each going to share their reports from their sections. Now, I will tell you that in the interest of time, we're going to be hitting the high points on these slides. We will post this PowerPoint in its entirety. You can also read the full report from each one of these task force groups on our website, Transportation After the Pandemic.